Usually, I don't ask people to share my videos because I find myself to be a very boring person. But every now and then, I talk about something that I wish more people would have access to. Because every now and then I show a little bit of glimpse of what's going on behind the curtain. And I think this is the exact type of video where I'm going to show you that the tactics the communists were using in Romania, the fear-mongering and the propaganda from the press is nearly identical to what we are seeing today happening in nations like New Zealand, nations like Australia, and many nations across the West. But before I translate the newspaper, I have to give you a little bit of context so you can understand what was going on. The dear leader of Romania decided, without public approval, that Romania should pay all of its debts. And Romania was the only nation on earth which actually paid all of its debts to the IMF. The problem is that in order to pay all of the debt, everything that Romania produced was sold on to the foreign market. So we're talking about meat, we're talking about oil, we're talking about medicine. Almost everything that was produced was being exported so Romanians can gather the money in order to pay for the debt. The cost of this was quite high. People would freeze to death in their own homes because there was no electricity, there was a shortage of heating. People would starve because there were shortages of food, there were shortages of medication, was shortage all around because everything made, again, was being sold on the foreign markets. Now, eventually, the government came up with a ration system. People were only allowed to have 1 to 2 kilograms of meat per month. People were only allowed to have a certain amount of sugar per month. People were only allowed to have very little cooking oil per month. And this caused immense shortages. You could go to a store even if you had the money. If you didn't have your ration card, you would not be able to buy the goods. And as this is happening, we notice a very interesting article coming in the newspaper. Now, this article is very old, so the person is probably no longer with us. Don't be afraid if I'm doxing anyone, because I'm not. But at the time, the press did dox this individual. And this is the title, Worthy of Public Disdain. In the People's Paper, we usually make public the faces of the people who bring honor to the collective. This time, we've decided to make an exception and present to you this individual. And they drop his full name and his address. Again, this was a national newspaper. Everyone could read it. We are not presenting him for exemplary behavior at the workplace or some social justice contribution. Quite the contrary. It's to express public disdain for what he has done. This man is buying and stocking up in his house sugar and cooking oil. Up until now, he has gathered no less than 34 bottles of cooking oil and 26 kilograms of sugar, just like you can see in the photo. People like Baciu jeopardizes the nation's economy. Even if the government is allowing enough sugar and oil to be enough for everyone, because of some people who buy far more than they need, the stores are always empty, and this causes queues where thousands of people have to wait for hours. In order to combat this, we need to stop people from hoarding and cast our collective social ire against those who display a disgusting level of selfishness and lack of care for others. So in other words, the government created a problem. The shortages in Romania were artificially created by the government. And in order for the government to keep people complacent, they used censorship, fear tactics, but most importantly and most effective, they turned people against each other. See, it wasn't the fault of the government for the shortages. The fault was because of individual like this guy in the press that you were starving during the middle of the winter, sitting at a 1,000 people queue waiting to buy a little bit of bread. So if you are upset, if you are angry, don't blame the government, don't blame the people in charge, they just want your good. The people in the government are for the good of the collective. The people to blame are the ones that are hoarding. They are the really greedy ones, and they are the horrible ones. And surprise, surprise, it was actually working. A lot of disdain and animosity happened between citizen and citizen. It's not the government against citizens, it's the government plus citizens against the ones that are trying to find loopholes and ways to get out from the government oppression. And I think this is the most effective tactic that tyrannical governments have. It is the best tool in the oppressor's toolkit. As Simone de Beauvoir says, the oppressor would not be so strong if he did not have accomplices among the oppressed. This is what most people don't understand. They usually think of an authoritarian government like the Romanian socialist government, that it was it against the people. In reality, a lot of the people were on behalf of the government. And you see this happening many times through human history. You get to see it with Saddam Hussein. In 1979, he went to parliament and he did a purge in his own party. He purged the people that conspired against him, and he had them led outside where they would get super canceled. And everyone else could hear as the people outside are getting super canceled, but everyone was clapping every time a new name was being read from the list. Everyone was cheering. And the people who would be super canceled 5 minutes from now would be cheering as well, as their co-conspirators were getting super canceled. And I think that is an important aspect of the psychology of the masses, where you have people that constantly pretend to be on the side of whomever has the stick, whomever wields the power. And they do it for various reasons, whether it's self-interest, whether they want to be seen as not being a problem. The interests don't really matter, right? So where am I going with this? Well, I was just reading about this article where people in Romania during communism were arrested for smuggling food. And the press made articles to encourage others to hate them, to encourage public disdain, as the press said. And just today I saw an article from New Zealand where, yet again, people were arrested for smuggling food. I didn't think I would ever see this happen in a civilized nation, in a first world country that pretends to be a democracy at least. But then again, it was also the Democratic Republic of Socialist Romania, so there's that. But still, it's very interesting that you would never be able to convince people 3 years ago that anyone in New Zealand would be arrested for smuggling KFC food. That is just mind-blowing. You wouldn't think that it's in the newspaper, and you wouldn't think that they might get prison for it. Apparently, it's going to be between 3 to 6 months, as well as a fine that may be all the way to $2,800 to $3,000. Again, for smuggling food. And the press is encouraging people to condemn this activity of smuggling food. And this is not just about food smuggling or whatever. It's just one example of what I wanted to show, is that you have the government being incompetent or just greedy, led by people who just want more power and are using various tactics that are harmful for the population at large. And the press, which is carrying water for these people, instead of blaming the politicians, they're going to try to get people to blame each other. See, if only that guy wouldn't smuggle the KFC, maybe the lockdown would be over sooner. And like, he is jeopardizing he is making the situation worse for everyone because he is greedy and he is selfish. Just like the guy in the Romanian newspaper was greedy and selfish for hoarding oil and hoarding sugar, and without people like him, you wouldn't have long queues. And of course, the press never asked the real question, which is, well, if there's not enough oil and sugar inside the store, then why are people queuing up? You would think they would leave and go to another store. And just how many of these people are there if the situation is so dire that you have thousands of people queuing up? That would mean the overwhelming majority of people are hoarding. And then who's to condemn them? Like, if the overwhelming majority of people are doing something, who's going to condemn them? But the press was never asking questions. The press was just pushing the party line. And of course, that wouldn't happen in other places right now would it? Because now we have democracy. And we have the freedom of the press. The only human right that still exists, by the way. Because all the others seem to be hampered a little bit. Let me know what you guys think. And I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.